Hi, this is your host of Bhartia and welcome to TFiR. Let's talk. Today we have with us once again Keith Pitt, founder and CEO of Buildkite. Keith, it's great to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And today we are going to talk about a few announcements that you folks recently made. Of course, we'll talk about that, but of course, we have hosted you before, so our audience, they are aware of Buildkite. But just remind our viewers, what is Buildkite all about?
Oh, Buildkite is what we're calling a scale-out delivery platform. Now, Buildkite is a tool primarily used for software delivery. We're in the business of taking the tens of millions, hundreds of millions of lines of code that developers write on a daily basis. We take that code, we test it, we check it, we build it, we package it, and we deploy it to their customers. And Buildkite is used by some of the most sophisticated and top engineering teams on the planet. We recently ran some numbers, and what we learned was that over 1 billion people in the world use software that is created by Buildkite. So we're talking about Uber use Buildkite, Slack use Buildkite, Pinterest, Shopify. When you add up all the customers of those platforms, over 1 billion people use software that is deployed by Buildkite. So yeah, Buildkite is a software delivery tool, and I have a background in engineering, so I just absolutely love building developer tools and talking about developer tools. So I'm so pumped to be here and talk about all the things that we're doing at Buildkite.
You folks recently launched, the first scale-out delivery platform. Talk a bit about what it is and what was the reason for bringing it out at this point.
Here's the thing, speed matters. Speed has always mattered, and so does concurrency. What we know is that last year, I think 2023, a DORA report came out. And in this DORA report, it said the elite companies in the world, I think that was the category they used, the elite, the best of the best companies in the world, which is around 18% of software delivery teams, deploy once a day. 18%. The elite category. Once a day. That boggles my mind. We've been doing DevOps for how many years now? 15 years. DevOps is like angsty teenager, hasn't learned to drive yet, but is still kind of really annoying. We still have not cracked this code of like delivery at scale. Buildkite customers, however, they have cracked it. Slack used Buildkite, and they went from a 1 hour build to a 10-minute build. And what that meant was instead of deploying, 1 to 6 times a day, they can deploy upwards of 40, 50 times a day. Now, why is this important? Because what we know is that those that win in market are ones that can test all the time, test lots of different ideas, because ideas are cheap. Creation isn't actually, the cost of creation every single year drops significantly. The act of building something, once you have an idea, making it is getting cheaper and cheaper. Even more so now with all the AI assisted coding tools, right? So if the cost of creation is lower, then we're going to live in a world where the best ideas win. And the only way you can really test if an idea works is getting it in market faster than anyone else. So that's why delivery matters. That's why concurrency matters, because you want to be able to deploy tens and tens of times a day. And the other part of concurrency is when you have large teams of thousands of developers, they're all going to want to deploy as well. So it's not just like the team's ability, one person's ability to deploy every day. It's the whole company's ability. So if you've got 4,000 developers all trying to deploy, it's chaos with legacy tooling. It's chaos. It just doesn't work. So that's why we are championing this real idea that scale out and concurrency matters.
You already mentioned customers, and as you mentioned, that we have been talking about DevOps for a very long time, but a lot of problems are, still there because of the way things are scaling. and the new use cases are also emerging. Things are getting more complicated, not they are not getting easier. So there's a lot of onus on you folks to, because the fact is that I had a lot of discussions here that this complexity is not going to go away. We have to learn how to deal with it, and we have to help. And you also rightly said that the more we lower the barrier of entry, the more people will be able to use these technologies, because everybody wants to take advantage, but they get intimidated. Can you did mention some customers, but if you can also talk a bit about, even at this stage, how customers are leveraging your platform and what difference they see before using your platform and after using their platform in terms of developer time, productivity, and even cost.
The number one thing that Buildkite offers is a trusted platform. Now, you know, I made Buildkite. I checked the commits I have. I have around 18,000 commits in the code base when I was still on the tools. I'm not so much on the tools these days, but I know first and foremost the impact of tooling on developer productivity. There's that saying, like bad craftspeople blame their tools or something. That's just not true in the world of software delivery. Bad tools are productivity killers, and they are ultimately business killers. You need to be able to trust the tools that you use. People jump out of a plane because they trust that the parachute's going to work, right? They have an implicit relationship with the thing on their back that when they jump, this thing is going to catch them. Software delivery and software delivery tooling needs to be exactly the same. They need to be able to trust the tool, that when the tool says your stuff is good to go, it's good to go. Or if there's an issue, then there's an issue. The moment teams lose trust in that system, it's game over. And that's kind of where Buildkite plays a role. So that's where the concurrency piece for us is, it's a guarantee of concurrency. If you can't trust your stuff is going to run now and like maybe sometime in the future, then you start to distrust it. Flaky tests are one of these things that I just see demoralize teams time and time and time again. And Buildkite has been helping these teams to really get on top of flaky tests for quite some time. So this is why the Ubers of the world uses. Uber uses upwards of 100,000 concurrent agents to test their stuff every day. That's mind-boggling. If you know the existing tools in the market, you know that's not even possible. The Java applications that you download and run in some virtual machine somewhere can't even get close to 100,000. And so that's why concurrency matters, because more concurrency equals more speed, and you can trust the tooling more.
You have talked about concurrency, so I also want to talk about from customers' perspective. Why is it so important?
Concurrency is about getting stuff out to market faster. You want to be able to test ideas in market. So my dad was in the quality assurance of pipelines. Weirdly, his job was to drive alongside these big PVC pipes in the outback of Australia, making sure there were no holes in them. That was my dad's job. It was the most boring job on the planet. Thousands and thousands of miles of pipe he had to go inspect. I know this because I went with him a couple of trips. It was very, very boring. It took him days and days and days and days and days. Now, that could have been much faster if instead of just my dad, there was 1,000 people checking it. It would have gotten much faster. Instead of taking days, it would have taken seconds. And then we can move on to some other pipe and some other pipe and some other pipe. Now, concurrency is important because you need to be able to check these things at scale. These teams, these software applications that we have their automated test suites have upwards of maybe 10,000, 30,000, 50,000 tests that have to be run on every single change. And you have to start thinking about the numbers. You have like a team of 100, 30,000 tests, 10 changes a day. I don't know what the numbers add up to, but that's a lot of compute. That's a lot of compute. There's a lot of tests that have to be run. If you run them sequentially, it'll take you days. Just like my dad and the 1,000 miles of pipe, things will grind to a complete halt. We ran some numbers last year on Buildkite and the pipelines used within Buildkite. And what we found is if you were to take all the builds run in Buildkite in 2023 and run them end to end, it would have taken 18,000 years. 18,000 years. So last year, Buildkite saved our customers upwards of 18,000 years of compute time and 90% reduction of delivery time. 90%. And these customers that use Buildkite today, the ones that I've already mentioned, they haven't just started using Buildkite. They've been using Buildkite for 5 years, 8 years. And that's how they're able to have such success in market, is because they've figured out that delivery should be part of their product, not just some back office process.
And you also mentioned, your hybrid approach. So, what is the importance, significance of your hybrid model for customers as well?
Buildkite was the inventor of the bring your own compute hybrid model in the CI/CD space. Like, we were the first to do that. The idea being, for the listeners that don't quite know what this means, is instead of handing over your code to a third party CI/CD provider, you connect your own compute to Buildkite. So we have a SaaS platform that is the orchestrator, and then you connect your own cloud compute, whether it's GCP or AWS or some computer you have access to, or some data center. Right? You connect that to Buildkite, and then we will operationalize and orchestrate the builds for you. That is what we mean by hybrid. Now, why is that awesome? It means that we don't never see your source code. There is a strong line between what we see and what we can't see. And we can't see your secrets, and we can't see your source code. I'm a big believer in continuous deployment, like being able to deploy once your builds and your tests are green. I think that's should be non-negotiable in 2024. But to do that, you need to give your delivery tooling access to production. You need to give them the keys to production. Any team that is giving a third party deploy credentials are going to have a bad time. You shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be trusting any third party. So this hybrid model is critical in modern workloads. Also, the other great benefit of this hybrid stuff, which we sort of stumbled into, wasn't by any means on purpose. It sort of happened just at it was a nice discovery we had, is you could use unique and interesting hardware. You're not limited by the hardware that is provided to you by existing CI/CD tooling on the market. You can use your own stuff. So we've seen Buildkite be installed in lots of different funky ways. We've seen people install Buildkite into cars to do on-device testing, on fridges to do IoT type stuff. We've seen Buildkite be used quite heavily in AI ML learning, because you can install Buildkite agents on machines with these, $100,000 fancy GPUs to do model training. And in that model training scenario as well, we don't see the model because of this strong hybrid approach. We don't see what's happening. All we see is the telemetry and the results of the workloads. So that's why this hybrid approach is really, really important.
When we talk about, as you earlier said, we have been doing DevOps for a very long time, but some of these pain points are still there. Is there tools? There's a whole, very big ecosystem, like Buildkite is part of that ecosystem. You folks are building tool, but what is the role of right practices? What is the role of correct culture for organizations, whether it's hyperscaler or it doesn't private cloud? It doesn't matter what. Now the problem is that we can see as tools, technologies, and cultural practices as two different things, but sometimes using right tools can build the culture. It can become a catalyst to embrace best practices. It can become a catalyst to encourage that cultural change. So what role does Buildkite play in kind of bringing those changes that you do feel should be there within teams?
It's a great question. The longer I do this, the longer the more that I get sharper on what are the real issues in these teams. And just like you said, a lot of the times, these are major cultural issues in these teams. And these cultural issues don't just happen overnight. They build up over a long period of time. I call it delivery decay. Just like your teeth. Your teeth are not going to fall out if you don't brush them once. But if you don't brush them for a year, 2 years, you're going to have a bad time after a while. Now, what I see time and time again is engineering leaders, they sometimes say this, and it really drives me up the wall. I don't want my team worrying about CI/CD. They could not be further from the truth. That is such the wrong thinking. The reason for that is what they're really saying is, I don't want my team thinking about delivery. I don't want my team thinking about getting this code in front of customers. Our customers have the complete opposite mentality here. They obsess over delivery. Shopify, very, very, very early on, their build times were upwards of 45 minutes an hour. This was before they adopted Buildkite. And their engineering leader at the time said, we are going to move to a 5-minute deploy model. 5 minutes to production. Now, that was insane. That was unheard of. But they used that as a catalyst and a driver to change culture. And to do that, they had to break a lot of best practice because they had already followed best practice to get to where they are. If you follow best practice, you only end up, with what the best right now is, not what the future is capable of. And so for them to move from the model they had to a 5-minute deploy, they had to throw out the rule book, throw out existing tech. They had to come up with brand new techniques. For example, some of these teams to even get close to a 5 or 10-minute deploy, they don't just run their tests pre-deploy. They run a portion of their tests pre-deploy, deploy, and then do more testing post-deploy. And if they find an issue, they do auto rollbacks. Because what they know is they can only run a selection of the tests to gain 90% confidence that this deploy is going to work. Again, that's something that's not really best practice. Best practice is you run your full test suite before deploy. But best practice only sort of gets you so far. And so the teams that win are the ones that obsess over delivery, that make delivery part of their product, not just some back office process.
This may be a kind of unpopular opinion, but sometimes do you think that we stress too much on best practices? As you rightly said, it really depends on where you are in the journey, because the best practice might also change, how further you are versus whether you're starting. So instead of, and also at the same time, when you look at companies that operate at a scale of Uber, their best practices, their team structure is different than, let's say, a startup, even if they're competing in the same space. So can you also talk a bit about how to also take best advantage of these tools which is available without getting caught too much on what the best practices are? Because once you're starting a new company, you don't have a playbook there. I mean, when you start Buildkite, there was no playbook for you. You build things, and also actually you have to break a lot of ceilings. You have to actually break a lot of norms because you are competing against incumbents who have been doing those things for decades. So you have to try something new that they have not done. So what is your advice in that case?
I'm reminded of the McDonald's story a lot of the time. If your viewers have ever seen the movie The Founder, I highly recommend watching it because it's about the creation of McDonald's. And now, if you watch this story unfold, it's about a restaurant that was struggling to really break into market. They were selling lots of different stuff. They were selling ribs and pastas and all these different things. And then one day they said, we're only going to do burgers. We're going to do burgers, but they couldn't make enough burgers to get them out the door to make a lot of money. So they committed to themselves, instead of a burger in 30 minutes, let's make a burger in 30 seconds. And they held that in their heart. That was what they did. And to do that, they had to break a lot of rules. At that time, burgers were served on plates. But now in this new world, let's serve them in paper. Excuse me? A burger in paper? What is this? Where is my cutlery? I have to walk to the window? Excuse me? They had to reinvent the whole thing. But what they did, and they invented the Speedy system. It's such a cool story. I love it to bits. But what they did is they held this delivery in their heart. And they used a lot of the same. They had to invent they had to invent some new tooling. They had to invent a ketchup gun that goes that puts out the ketchup and mustard really quickly. But they used a lot of off-the-shelf tooling as well. They still use the same grills, a lot of the same kitchen setups. And so how I see all this all working is that these teams that adopt Buildkite, one of the reasons they choose us is because we give them the tools and the Lego bricks, and they assemble it themselves. I'm constantly surprised by how the different ways that customers are taking Buildkite and using it. I'll sit down with a customer and I'll say, hang on, what did you just do? How did you make that work? I didn't know I even could do that, because we have this really strong dynamic pipeline model. If your viewers want to take a look into it, it means that the steps in a pipeline are not static. They're not set. They change at runtime, and a build can reinforce and create new steps within itself as the build progresses. But what that means is people can use Buildkite and they can tear it apart and rebuild it. We are not strict. We don't hold people. We're not like this strong grip around your delivery culture. We let you play with the tools. And I think playing with tooling is such an important part of this process. Like a Lego set you buy from the shops can be lots of different things. You buy like some pirate ship set. It can be a pirate ship, but it can also be a spaceship. It can be a car. It can be a house. It could be so many different things. But it encourages creativity and encourages play. And it might seem silly, by the way. I know that sometimes it can be weird for someone to say you need to be able to play with software delivery tooling. But I find that it's such a critical part of the culture in these teams, because the more you play with tooling when it's not stressful in like okay times, you are way more effective in the stressful times. When there's pressure from the business to deliver faster, or some competitor sort of outflanks you, you need to get something out to market quicker. You want to be a master of the tooling. You want to know that tooling like the back of your hand. It's kind of why those military people play and like twirl their guns. I don't like the gun reference too much, but it proves my point. Like they play with their tools. So when they really need to use them, they are so comfortable with them. And that's a big part of what these teams do. They obsess over tooling, they obsess over culture, and then magic happens when those two things are together.
Keith, thank you so much for joining me today, and of course talk about Buildkite. And as usual, I look forward to chatting with you folks again. Thank you.
You too. Thanks for having me.